The moment the red emergency light on the dam intake started flashing, Karen slammed the steel gate shut and smiled like she had just saved the neighborhood, even though she had actually endangered half the county and somehow thought that made her powerful. I was standing 20 feet away when it happened, holding my phone, watching a woman with a clipboard and a self-made badge lock a public reservoir like it was her personal garage. She didn't even look nervous. She looked proud. That was when I realized this wasn't just another HOA argument. This was about to get very real, very fast. The reservoir sat at the edge of our development, a massive concrete spillway feeding water to farms, fire hydrants, and 2 towns downstream. It had been there longer than any of our houses, longer than the HOA, longer than Karen's sense of authority. But Karen had decided it was hers. She marched up to the gate with that stiff-legged confidence she always used when she thought rules bent around her will. Beige blazer, oversized sunglasses, clipboard clutched like a weapon. The padlock clanged through the steel loop with a sound that echoed across the water. I stepped forward without thinking. "You can't do that," I said. She turned slowly, lips curling like I had just insulted her intelligence. "Yes, I can," she replied, tapping the clipboard. "Emergency access is suspended until further notice." Behind her, the warning light blinked again. I glanced at the sign bolted to the concrete wall. County Water Authority. No unauthorized access. Penalty subject to state law. "This isn't HOA property," I said. "This is county infrastructure." Karen let out a short laugh, the kind meant to belittle. "It's adjacent to our community," she said. "Which makes it our responsibility. And frankly, you residents can't be trusted not to wander." Wander. As if the reservoir was a picnic area. A gust of wind rippled the water behind her. Far below, the spillway roared, a reminder that this place moved thousands of gallons a minute whether Karen approved or not. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Karen, that gate is for engineers and emergency crews. You lock it, you're blocking access." She leaned in closer, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "Then maybe they should have asked permission." That was when I pulled out my phone and started recording. Her eyes flicked to it just for a second, then hardened. "Recording HOA business without consent is a violation," she snapped. "This isn't HOA business," I said. "This is a reservoir." She straightened and raised her voice so the 2 other board members standing behind her could hear. "For the record," she announced, "this resident is interfering with safety operations." Safety operations. The irony almost made me laugh. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. The other stared at the ground. Neither said a word. I stepped back and dialed the number I already had saved. The county engineer's office. I'd called them once before, months ago, when Karen tried to install decorative fencing too close to the spillway. The phone rang twice. "County Water Authority," a man answered. "This is Mark," I said. "I'm at the reservoir on Ridgeview. The HOA president just locked the access gate." There was a pause. "She did what?" Before I could answer, Karen lunged toward me and slapped her hand over the phone. "You are not authorized to make that call," she hissed. I pulled the phone back. "Get your hand off me!" Her face flushed red. "You are obstructing my authority." Behind her, the red light began flashing faster. The man on the phone raised his voice. "Sir, are you still there?" "Yes," I said. "She's blocking access." Another pause, longer this time. "Put her on speaker." I didn't even hesitate. Karen crossed her arms, chin lifted, as if preparing to educate a child. "This is Karen Whitfield," she said loudly. "President of Ridgeview Estates, HOA." "Ma'am," the voice replied, calm and dangerously professional, "unlock the gate immediately." Karen laughed. Actually laughed. "I don't take orders from bureaucrats," she said. "This community elected me." "You do not have jurisdiction over a Class 2 water control facility," he replied. "Unlock the gate now." She shook her head. "Not happening." I watched the moment she crossed from entitled into reckless. It was subtle, but it was there. That unwavering belief that nothing applied to her. "Ma'am," the engineer said, his voice sharpening, "if you do not unlock that gate within 60 seconds, I will dispatch county enforcement and initiate override protocol." Karen rolled her eyes and waved a hand dismissively. "Threats don't scare me." She turned to the board members behind her. "Document this resident's harassment." That was when a low mechanical hum rolled through the concrete beneath our feet. The lock she had placed on the gate vibrated. Karen froze. The hum grew louder, deeper, like something waking up. "What is that?" she snapped, suddenly less confident. The gate's control panel lit up. Yellow. Then green. I took a step back. "Karen," I said quietly, "they're overriding you." She rushed forward and grabbed the lock as if she could physically stop the system. "No. No, you're not allowed," she shouted at the panel. "This is HOA controlled." The lock disengaged with a sharp metallic click and dropped to the ground. The gate swung open slowly, deliberately, as if to make a point. Karen stood there staring, mouth open, clipboard hanging uselessly at her side. The engineer's voice came through the phone again. "Ma'am," he said, "step away from the gate. You are now interfering with county operations." In the distance, I heard the unmistakable sound of sirens approaching, not fast, not panicked, but inevitable. Karen turned toward me, eyes wide, fury battling fear. "This isn't over," she said. I looked past her at the open gate, the blinking lights, the approaching authority she couldn't vote herself above. "Oh," I said. "It absolutely is." The sirens didn't rush in like a movie scene. They took their time, slow and steady, the sound bouncing off the concrete walls of the spillway and echoing across the water like a warning Karen refused to hear. She stood frozen for a few seconds after the gate unlocked, staring at the fallen padlock as if it had betrayed her personally. Then she snapped back to life. "This is illegal," she shouted, pointing at the open gate. "You can't just override elected authority." The county engineer's voice stayed calm through the phone speaker, and that calm somehow made her angrier. "Ma'am, step away from the access point. You are obstructing critical infrastructure." Karen jabbed a finger toward me. "He manipulated you. He's been trying to undermine this board for months." I hadn't said a word. I didn't need to. One of the board members finally found his voice. "Karen, maybe we should just let them handle it." She whipped around on him. "Are you siding with him?" He shrank back instantly. I watched the dynamic I'd seen 100 times before. As long as no one challenged her, she felt invincible. The moment authority showed up that didn't care about her title, she started flailing. A county truck pulled up first. White. Unmarked except for a seal on the door. Then another behind it. No drama. No lights. Just people who actually knew what they were doing. A man in a hard hat stepped out, followed by a woman carrying a tablet. They walked straight past Karen like she wasn't even there. "Excuse me," Karen barked, stepping into their path. "You need to identify yourselves." The man stopped and looked at her like she'd asked why gravity existed. "County Water Authority," he said. "Ma'am, please step aside." "I'm the HOA president," she snapped. "This facility is adjacent to private property." The woman with the tablet didn't even slow down. "It's owned by the county. Built with federal funding. Regulated by state law." Karen scoffed. "Paper doesn't scare me." The man finally looked directly at her. "Ma'am, touching that gate again will result in charges." She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since I'd known her, she hesitated. That hesitation lasted exactly 3 seconds. She spun toward me instead. "This is on you," she said. "You escalated this." I felt something snap inside my chest. Not anger. Relief. "No," I said. "You did when you locked a reservoir." Her face twisted. "You people never respect leadership." The tablet woman tapped the screen. "Sir," she said to me, "did she physically place the lock?" "Yes," I said. "I recorded it." Karen lunged forward. "You do not have consent to use that footage." The woman looked up. Public facility. No expectation of privacy. Karen laughed, high and brittle. We'll see about that. The county engineer's voice came back through my phone. Mark, enforcement is 2 minutes out. Karen heard it. Her shoulders stiffened. Calling the police is harassment. The man in the hard hat sighed. Ma'am, they're not coming for him. That's when the fear finally broke through her arrogance. She backed up a step, then another, bumping into the metal railing behind her. Her eyes darted between the open gate, the county workers, and me. This community will hear about this, she said. You'll all regret humiliating me. The sound of gravel crunching announced the sheriff's SUV pulling in. Deputy Ramirez stepped out, sunglasses on, posture relaxed. He took in the scene in about 2 seconds. Afternoon, he said. Who locked the reservoir gate? Karen inhaled sharply. I did. As acting authority. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. Acting what? She puffed up again. HOA president. He nodded slowly. Ma'am, that doesn't give you authority over county infrastructure. She stepped closer to him, lowering her voice like she could intimidate a man with a badge. You're here because he called you, she said, gesturing at me. He's been harassing the board. Ramirez turned to me. You harassing anyone? No, I said. I reported a locked emergency gate. Ramirez nodded again and turned back to Karen. Unlocking that gate was not your call. It's already unlocked, she snapped. Yes, he said. Because the county overrode you. Her hands trembled. She clenched them into fists. This is discrimination, she said. You're all conspiring against me. Ramirez gestured toward the reservoir. This water feeds fire suppression lines. You block access, you risk lives. She scoffed. That's dramatic. The tablet woman didn't look up. There was a pressure anomaly flagged 15 minutes ago. Karen blinked. What? The man in the hard hat turned to her. If we hadn't regained access, we would have shut down flow as a precaution. I watched the color drain from her face. You mean, she said slowly, you would have cut water? Yes, he said. Including to your neighborhood. Her mouth opened, closed. I saw the moment she realized her power had nearly burned her own house down. Ramirez stepped closer. Ma'am, I'm issuing a formal warning for interference with public utilities. Any further action will result in charges. Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. You can't do this. He met her eyes. We just did. She turned toward the board members, desperate now. Say something. They didn't. The county crew resumed their work like she'd vanished. Karen stood there, surrounded by people who no longer listened to her. And for the first time I saw it sink in. She wasn't in control. Not here. Not anymore. As the sheriff's SUV idled and the county trucks hummed, I realized this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of her unraveling. Karen didn't leave after the sheriff issued the warning. She stayed planted near the railing, arms crossed, staring at the county workers like if she glared hard enough the law would blink first. It didn't. The engineer arrived 10 minutes later, and when he did, the temperature of the entire situation changed. He wasn't loud. He wasn't dramatic. He carried a worn leather folder and the kind of calm that only comes from knowing you outrank everyone in the room without having to say it. He walked straight up to the gate, knelt down, and inspected the lock Karen had dropped. Then he picked it up and turned toward her. Did you purchase this? He asked. Yes, Karen said sharply. To protect our residents. He nodded once and slipped it into a clear evidence bag. This will be logged, he said. Interference with water control access. Her eyes widened. That's theft. It's evidence. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped when Ramirez shifted his stance beside her. The engineer turned to me. You're the caller. Yes. Thank you, he said, like this happened every day. That somehow made Karen angrier than if he'd yelled. You don't thank instigators, she snapped. You discipline them. He finally looked at her fully. "Ma'am," he said, "you locked a gate that exists so firefighters don't have to ask permission while buildings burn." Her jaw tightened. "You're exaggerating." He opened the folder and held it out so she could see. Reservoir feeds Ridgeview hydrants, 3 commercial zones, and a volunteer fire station. Your signature is nowhere on this. She waved it away. "That paperwork is outdated." He smiled, just barely. "It was updated last quarter." Karen looked around for support. None came. The board members had drifted farther back, suddenly fascinated by the water level markers. She changed tactics. "This development pays taxes," she said. "We deserve a say." The engineer closed the folder. "You do. Through elections that don't include you." That landed hard. I saw something flicker across her face. Not rage. Panic. "This is a targeted attack," she said. "You're trying to make an example out of me." He didn't deny it. "We already are," he replied. The words hit like a hammer. Karen laughed nervously. "You can't just decide that." He gestured toward the open gate, the trucks, the sheriff, the blinking systems humming smoothly again. "We did." She turned toward me again, voice shaking now. "Tell them you misunderstood." I shook my head. "I didn't." She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "You don't know who you're messing with." I met her eyes. "I do. That's the problem." Ramirez cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I need your ID." Her head snapped toward him. "Why?" "Documentation." She hesitated. I'd never seen her hesitate when flashing authority. But now the clipboard hung forgotten at her side, and her hands moved slower. She handed it over. Ramirez checked it, then handed it back. "This is your warning. Next time, it won't be." She scoffed weakly. "There won't be a next time." The engineer raised an eyebrow. "You'd be surprised." A radio crackled on the engineer's belt. He turned away, listening, nodding. "Pressure stabilized," a voice said. "Access restored." He clicked it off and turned back to Karen. "You got lucky today," he said. "System caught it early." Her voice cracked. "Lucky?" "Yes," he said. "Luck runs out." That was the moment she snapped. She lunged toward the control panel, hand outstretched, like if she could just touch it again she'd reclaim control. Ramirez moved fast, grabbing her wrist and pulling her back. "Ma'am," he said sharply. "Do not touch that." She yanked her arm free. "Get your hands off me." He stepped between her and the panel. "Step away." The county workers froze. The board members gasped. Karen pointed at Ramirez, voice shrill. "Assault. I want him arrested." Ramirez didn't flinch. "Ma'am, I restrained you to prevent interference with public utilities." She looked around wildly. "Did you see that? He attacked me." No one answered. The engineer sighed and spoke into his phone. "Escalate this. Log attempted reinterference." Karen's head snapped toward him. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "this is now a record." Her face drained of color. "You can't do this," she whispered. He met her gaze. "We already are." She backed away, stumbling slightly, heel catching on the concrete edge. I watched her finally realize something terrifying. This wasn't an argument she could win. This wasn't a board meeting she could dominate. This was a system that didn't care about her tone, her title, or her tantrums. And it was just getting started. As the engineer closed his folder and the sheriff radioed in his report, Karen stood alone near the railing, clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield that no longer worked. For the first time, she looked small. And for the first time, she looked scared. Karen didn't explode after that. She imploded. The rage drained out of her all at once, replaced by a tight, brittle calm that made my stomach knot. I'd learned over the years that this version of her was more dangerous than the shouting one. This was the Karen who planned. She straightened her blazer, smoothed her hair, and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Fine," she said lightly. "You've made your point." No one responded. The county crew finished their checks, moving with quiet efficiency. The engineer spoke softly into his radio, using words that sounded boring but carried weight. Operational status. Compliance restored. Incident log. Log. That word followed Karen like a shadow. She turned to the board members again, voice syrupy now. We'll discuss this privately. One of them finally shook his head. I don't think there's anything to discuss. Her smile faltered for half a second before snapping back into place. Of course there is, she said. This affects the community. It affects you, he replied, surprising both of us. Karen stared at him as if he'd just spoken a foreign language. The engineer approached me quietly. You live nearby? Yes. You might want to document anything unusual over the next few weeks. I raised an eyebrow. You think she's done? He gave a thin smile. No. That answer sat heavy in my chest. The sheriff cleared the scene shortly after, leaving behind a few county trucks and a very deflated HOA president. Karen lingered until the last possible moment, pacing near the gate like she was memorizing every bolt and hinge. Before she left, she stopped in front of me. This isn't over, she said again, but this time it sounded rehearsed. I shrugged. You already said that. Her eyes narrowed. Enjoy your little victory. She turned and walked toward her SUV, heels clicking sharply against the pavement. As soon as she drove off, the atmosphere shifted. The board members exhaled like they'd been holding their breath for years. One of them approached me. She's never going to let this go. I know, I said. That night I slept poorly. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew how Karen operated when cornered. She didn't back down. She reframed. By morning, the emails started. Official HOA notice. Subject line in all caps. She accused me of endangering the community by inviting outside authorities onto private land. She claimed I had interfered with safety protocols. She announced an emergency board review of my conduct. I laughed when I read it. Then I forwarded it to the county engineer. He replied with one sentence. Good. Keep everything. The next day, Karen escalated. She posted on the community forum, spinning a story where she was the protector and I was the threat. According to her, the reservoir had been at risk because of residents trespassing, and she had acted decisively. Comments trickled in at first. Confused. Curious. Then someone asked a question she hadn't prepared for. Why did the county override you? Karen responded with a wall of text that answered everything except that. Screenshots started circulating. Someone shared my video. The clip of her locking the gate. Her smug smile. Her voice claiming authority she didn't have. The tone of the forum shifted fast. Karen noticed. She deleted the thread. Then she doubled down. A letter appeared on my door that afternoon. Certified. Formal. Heavy on legal language. Violation of HOA conduct standard. Threatening fines. Mandatory hearing. I took pictures and sent them to the engineer and the sheriff. Ramirez texted back a thumbs up and a single line. She's digging. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. Karen framed it like a trial. She reserved the clubhouse, printed packets, invited witnesses. I showed up with a folder of my own. The room was full. Residents, curious and tense. Karen sat at the head of the table, chin high, eyes sharp. She opened with a speech about order, authority, and protecting the community from reckless individuals. She never mentioned the reservoir by name. When it was my turn, I stood and simply played the video. The room went silent. Karen tried to interrupt. This is taken out of context. I didn't stop it. The clip ended with the gate unlocking itself. A murmur rippled through the room. I followed it with emails from the county. The logged incident. The formal warning issued to her. Karen's face tightened. This board doesn't answer to the county, she snapped. The board members exchanged glances. One of them cleared his throat. Actually, we do when it comes to public infrastructure. Karen slammed her hand on the table. This is a coup. No one agreed. The vote was swift. Her emergency powers were suspended pending review. She sat frozen as the words sank in. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen had no gavel. No authority to hide behind. As the meeting adjourned, she stared at me with pure hatred. "You think this is over," she said. I met her gaze calmly. "No. I think it's documented." She left without another word. I watched her go, knowing something important had shifted. Karen hadn't lost yet, but she had lost control of the story. And for someone like her, that was the beginning of the end. Karen didn't disappear after the hearing. She retreated, which was somehow worse. For a few days the neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. No emails. No posts. No clipboard sightings. It felt like the calm after a storm where everyone knows another one is already forming offshore. Then the notices started appearing. First on the community bulletin board. Then taped to mailboxes. Then slid under doors like threats. Special Assessment Review. Emergency Infrastructure Committee. Mandatory Compliance Inspection. All signed by Karen. Except she didn't have the authority to sign anything anymore. She'd removed the suspension line from the footer and printed them anyway. People started knocking on my door, notices in hand, confusion written all over their faces. "Is this real?" one neighbor asked. "No," I said. "It's desperation." Karen began conducting what she called inspections. She walked the neighborhood with a measuring wheel and a borrowed safety vest, photographing fences, driveways, garden shed. She cited vague violations tied to access and safety. It didn't take long before she reached my house. She stopped at my gate and stood there, writing furiously like she was documenting a crime scene. I stepped outside. "Still pretending?" I asked. She didn't look up. "This is lawful. Your powers are suspended." She finally looked at me, eyes glittering. "Not until the review is complete." "That's not how suspension works." She smirked. "According to you." I watched her measure the width of my driveway, the same driveway fire trucks had used for years without issue. "Obstruction risk," she muttered, jotting it down. "You're manufacturing violations," I said. She smiled thinly. "I'm enforcing standards." That afternoon, my phone rang. The county engineer. "She's been filing complaints," he said. "A lot of them." "About what?" "About us." Apparently, Karen had begun emailing every agency she could find. County water, fire safety, environmental protection, even the state. Her argument shifted with each message. Sometimes she claimed the reservoir was unsafe. Other times she claimed it was mismanaged. Always, she framed herself as the concerned authority being ignored. "She's trying to overwhelm the system," the engineer said. "It won't work." "Then why do I feel like it's getting worse?" "Because she's escalating," he replied. "People like her don't stop. They just change angles." 2 days later, the fire department showed up. Not because of Karen. Because of the reservoir. A scheduled inspection that had been planned long before her stunt. The irony was painful. The trucks rolled in, red and official, crews moving with purpose. Neighbors gathered, whispering. Karen appeared like she'd been summoned. She marched up to the fire chief, waving one of her notices. "I demanded this inspection," she announced. The chief looked at her blankly. "We've had this scheduled for 6 months." She flushed. "Then you're welcome." He turned away. The inspection was thorough. Access points checked. Flow rates measured. Hydrants tested. Everything passed. Publicly. The chief spoke to the crowd afterward. "Access is critical. That gate must remain unobstructed at all times." Karen stood stiffly at the edge of the group, jaw clenched. The next morning, she tried something bolder. She filed for an emergency injunction. I found out when a process server knocked on my door. Karen was attempting to force a court review of the county's authority, claiming the HOA had been unlawfully stripped of oversight. It was baseless. It was also public. The county attorney called me that afternoon, his voice tired but amused. "She's making herself famous," he said. "What happens now?" She's triggered a formal investigation into her actions. The word investigation felt heavy. Karen must have realized it too. Her inspections stopped. The notices vanished. But the emails didn't. Late-night messages sent to the board, rambling and accusatory. Threats of lawsuit. Claims of betrayal. One board member resigned. Another stopped responding. The structure Karen had built her power on began to crumble quietly. I ran into her one evening at the grocery store. She looked different. Tired. Her blazer was gone. The confidence was frayed. She saw me and froze. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "You ruined everything," she said finally. I shook my head. "You did." She laughed softly. "They'll see. I'm right." I didn't argue. Because by then, I knew something she didn't want to accept. This wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't even about the reservoir. It was about the system she'd challenged, deciding how hard it needed to push back. And systems like that never move gently. They move decisively. And Karen had just given them every reason to do so. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, plain white envelope, no HOA logo, no threatening language splashed across the front. That alone told me it wasn't Karen. It was the county. I opened it at the kitchen counter and read it twice before the weight of it really landed. Formal notice of investigation. Scope included interference with public utilities, impersonation of authority, and misuse of organizational power. Karen's name appeared on the first page. I wasn't listed as a subject. I was listed as a witness. By the end of the week, everyone knew. County investigators began showing up quietly, not in flashing vehicles or uniforms, but in sedans that parked down the street and people who knocked politely and took note. They spoke to board members. They spoke to residents. They spoke to the fire chief. They spoke to the county engineer. They didn't speak to Karen. Not yet. That silence gnawed at her. She started appearing again, hovering at the edges of things. Standing too close during conversations. Sitting in on meetings she technically wasn't allowed to attend anymore. She smiled a lot. Too much. "I'm cooperating fully," she told anyone who would listen. No one had asked. The board held a closed session one evening, and for the first time, they asked me to attend. Not as a resident. As context. They looked exhausted. "She's been calling us non-stop," one of them admitted. "Threatening lawsuits. Accusing us of conspiring." "Are you?" I asked. "No," he said quickly. "We're trying to survive this." They showed me the emails. Pages of them. Karen swinging wildly between victimhood and fury. 1 minute pleading. The next warning them they'd be ruined. "She keeps saying she has documents," another board member said. "Proof. Of what?" They all shrugged. That night, Karen sent me an email. Not an HOA notice. Not a threat. A personal message. "You think you've won. You haven't. I protected this place when no one else cared. They'll realize it." I didn't respond. The next morning, county enforcement arrived at her house. Not with sirens. Not with drama. Just 2 officials and a clipboard. Neighbors watched from windows. Karen answered the door in workout clothes, hair pulled back, eyes sharp. I didn't hear what was said, but I saw the moment her posture changed. The way her shoulders sagged just slightly. They handed her paperwork. She read it. Then she laughed. A loud, brittle sound that carried down the street. She waved the papers like they were meaningless and closed the door in their faces. The investigators didn't react. They made a note and walked back to their car. An hour later, they returned with the sheriff. That time, the door didn't close. Karen's voice rose, shrill and frantic. I heard words like unlawful and harassment and retaliation. Ramirez stayed calm. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "you've been ordered to cease all HOA-related activity immediately." "I don't accept that," she snapped. "You don't have to," he replied. "You just have to comply." She accused them of targeting her, of silencing a woman in leadership, of punishing her for caring too much. The neighbors didn't look convinced. When they left, Karen stood in her driveway shaking, clutching the papers to her chest like they might vanish if she let go. The following days unraveled quickly. Her emergency injunction was dismissed outright. The judge didn't even schedule a hearing. The county released a public statement. Brief, clear, damning. No HOA has authority over county water infrastructure. Any interference is subject to enforcement. Karen's name wasn't mentioned. Everyone knew it was about her anyway. The board held another meeting, this one open. Karen showed up late, sliding into a chair near the back like she belonged there. When the agenda reached her item, the room went quiet. The chair cleared his throat. "We're voting to remove Karen Whitfield from the board, pending the outcome of the investigation." Karen stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly across the floor. "You can't," she said. "I was elected." "You were suspended," he replied. "This is the next step." She laughed again, that same brittle sound. "This is illegal." The vote passed unanimously. Karen didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, eyes darting, realizing too late that the ground beneath her had finally given way. "This is a mistake," she said softly. No one answered. She walked out of the clubhouse alone. I watched her go, feeling something unexpected. Not triumph. Finality. But I also knew something else. People like Karen don't accept endings quietly. They look for one last move. And I could feel it coming, heavy and inevitable, like a storm pressing against the horizon. Chapter 6 ended not with a bang, but with a warning. Karen had nothing left to lose. And that made her dangerous. Karen's last move came quietly, which should have been my first warning. No emails. No notices. No dramatic posts. For 3 full days, her name vanished from every conversation. The board didn't hear from her. The investigators didn't either. Even the community forum stayed silent, like everyone was afraid to say her name out loud. That kind of silence doesn't mean peace. It means planning. I found out what she'd done when the fire chief called me directly. "Did you authorize construction near the Reservoir access road?" he asked. My stomach dropped. "No. We just received an anonymous complaint," he said, "claiming you blocked emergency access with private barriers." I laughed, sharp and humorless. "I haven't touched that road." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm calling you." An hour later, I drove out there. The access road looked wrong immediately. Fresh gravel piled unevenly along the shoulder. Orange cones placed just close enough to make turning a truck awkward. Not impossible. Just inconvenient. Just dangerous. Karen's signature style. I stepped out and walked the length of it, taking pictures. The cones weren't county issued. The gravel hadn't come from any approved supplier. Someone had tried to make it look official and failed. I didn't have to guess who. The county engineer arrived soon after, his jaw tight when he saw it. "She did this," he said flatly. "Can you prove it?" He nodded toward the cones. "She used the same contractor she tried to force on us last year." The fire chief showed up next, followed by Ramirez. This time, there was no calm patience. No warnings. "This crosses a line," Ramirez said. "She's testing response time," the chief added. "That's not entitlement. That's endangerment." They cleared the road in under 10 minutes. Karen must have been watching, because she showed up as the last cone was loaded into a truck. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She clapped. Slowly. "Well done," she said. "Very efficient." Ramirez turned toward her. "Ma'am, did you place these obstructions?" She smiled. "I was inspecting safety." "You were interfering with emergency access." She tilted her head. "Prove it." The engineer stepped forward. "We already did." Karen's smile twitched. "I warned you," she said, looking at me. "If you kept pushing, things would get messy." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You put lives at risk." She shrugged. "People exaggerate." Ramirez pulled out his radio. "I'm done talking." That was when she finally broke. "You can't arrest me," she shouted. "I didn't touch the gate. I didn't touch the reservoir. You obstructed access, he said. On purpose. She laughed again, louder now. Then arrest half the city. Ramirez didn't argue. He nodded to the deputy beside him. They stepped forward. Karen backed up, disbelief flashing across her face. No. No, you're bluffing. The cuffs clicked closed around her wrists with a sound that carried farther than any siren. The neighborhood froze. Karen looked around wildly, searching for someone to stop it. Anyone. No one moved. This is harassment, she yelled as they guided her toward the cruiser. I was protecting you people. The fire chief shook his head. You don't protect people by slowing help. She twisted to look at me one last time. Her eyes weren't angry anymore. They were terrified. As the cruiser door closed, something inside the neighborhood shifted. A tension we'd all learned to live with suddenly snapped. Ramirez leaned against his vehicle and exhaled. She's being charged. For what? Interference with public utilities. Obstruction of emergency access. False reporting. I nodded slowly. The county engineer looked out toward the reservoir, calm water reflecting the late afternoon light. She thought authority was a costume, he said. Turns out it's accountability. Karen's SUV sat abandoned at the curb. No clipboard. No notices. No power. Just silence. And for the first time since this began, I believed the end was close. Because Karen had finally done the one thing she couldn't talk her way out of. She'd made it criminal. The courtroom didn't look anything like Karen probably imagined. No audience. No spotlight. No chance to deliver a speech that bent reality around her word. Just wooden benches, muted colors, and a judge who looked like he'd heard every excuse 100 times before breakfast. Karen sat at the defense table gripping the edge so hard her knuckles had gone pale. Her hair was perfect. Her blazer was back. The costume was intact. The power wasn't. I sat behind the county attorney, not because I wanted to be seen, but because I was required to be there. Witness. That word still felt strange. Like this was all someone else's story and I'd wandered into the wrong chapter. When Karen finally looked back and saw me, her expression shifted. Not anger. Betrayal. Like I had broken some unspoken rule by letting consequences happen. The charges were read plainly. No drama. Interference with public utilities. Obstruction of emergency access. False reporting. Each one landed heavier than the last because none of them could be argued away with tone or titles. Karen's attorney tried anyway. He painted her as overzealous, passionate, a community leader who cared too much and misunderstood boundaries. He said words like confusion and good intentions and miscommunication. The judge listened politely. Then the county played the video. The gate locking. The smile. The refusal. The override. The courtroom stayed silent. Then came the photos. The cones. The gravel. The timestamps. Then the logs. Emails. Warnings. The recorded override notice. Karen stared straight ahead, jaw locked, eyes glassy. When it was her turn to speak, she stood slowly, smoothing her blazer like she always did before asserting control. I was elected, she said. I acted to protect my community. The judge leaned forward slightly. You acted without authority, he replied. And when corrected, you escalated. She shook her head. They undermined me. No, he said calmly. They stopped you. That distinction broke something in her. Her voice cracked. You don't understand what I sacrificed. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. What you sacrificed, he said, was judgment. The ruling came quickly. Fines. Probation. A permanent restraining order barring her from any involvement with the HOA or public infrastructure oversight. Mandatory compliance training she could never spin as leadership. And the part that hit her hardest. A formal notation. Public record. Karen Whitfield was declared unfit to hold organizational authority where public safety was involved. She sank back into her chair like the air had been knocked out of her. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, but not for her. For the county. For the story. Karen walked past them with her head down, no clipboard in sight. She didn't look at me. I didn't chase her. Weeks passed. The HOA stabilized. New leadership. Quiet meetings. No emergency notices taped to doors. The reservoir gate remained open, monitored by the people who were supposed to monitor it. Life returned to something resembling normal. One afternoon, I ran into Karen at a coffee shop across town. She looked smaller. Not physically, just stripped of certainty. She saw me and hesitated, then nodded stiffly. I nodded back. No words were exchanged. There was nothing left to say. As I walked out, I glanced back once. She was staring into her cup like it might explain where her authority went. The reservoir still flowed. The gate still stood. The system still worked. Karen had believed power came from declaring it. She learned too late that real authority doesn't announce itself. It overrides you. Quietly. Instantly. And permanently.